It was an exciting week in baseball, though I feel like I'm only saying that because I was a Met fan and things went very, very well for us. But there was a lot of very interesting things that happened this week, as well as some sad things just because of how many injuries there have been. It's just brutal out there for some teams.
And we lost Whitey Herzog, last week, which is a big loss. And he was somebody who was involved with the Mets way back when and didn't get the job as manager and went on to great things with other organizations, including the Royals and the Cardinals. I wanted to ask you, if you look at the standings, and here we are on Sunday, so we still have games to play on the
We're
Sunday.
recording this Sunday morning, so the games on Sunday haven't been played yet. But, I mean, if we're looking at the division in the AL East, you've got the Yankees, Orioles, Blue Jays, Red Sox, and Rays in that order.
Does anything surprise you about that?
Not really.
All
the teams are above 500.
Which, we thought the AL East would be good. I think the Red Sox, I can't see it lasting, but I keep saying that.
We thought the Yankees and the Orioles would be fighting for the top of the division, and then the Blue Jays, Red Sox, and Rays all have the same record, and they're all fighting just below them. So it's a really close division. So it's hard to really say anything too specific, but that's playing out how we expected it.
How about Grayson Rodriguez for the Orioles? He's 3-0, and I think we don't really talk about him even though he's one of their great young pitchers.
Well, now he's starting to show that he's really becoming that number one, which is great given that they have guys coming back like Paul Means.
Yeah, the troops are coming back, but Garrett Cole, hopefully for the Yankees, will eventually come back. Although they keep kind of pushing out when he's coming back.
Oh man, that's how it starts, and that turns into an all-year injury that he never quite comes back from.
So, and then in the Central Division, I don't know. I'd say that there's a surprise in my mind there. Not just that the Guardians are in first place, but what do you think?
Well, I think if you're talking about a surprise for them, the Minnesota Twin offense in particular has been dreadful this season, and that's why they're off to a pretty bad 7-12 start.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously only 19 games going into today's game, and I still think they have enough to win that division because I don't think the Guardians will continue to hit the way that they have and produce runs at the rate they've been producing them.
But you're already 7 games back.
Oh,
now 20, but it starts getting. You start building out a thing where okay, this is a team that's only scored 66 runs in just about their first 20 games. It's going to take a sudden that 20 games starts becoming a sample size that gets harder and harder. You're now like a week or two away from not being able to just hand wave the number of games that have been played.
I still think the Twins have a 10-game winning streak in them.
I think getting off to a great start is you can totally play yourself back out of that. You can the Pirates are a good example of that last year. But it's really hard to start 7-15 and climb out of that and win your division.
Like the Astros.
Still. Right, that's not easy.
So the Royals have sort of held on after the Mets came.
They came to play the Mets.
And the Mets kind of spanked them a little bit, 1-2 out of 3. But they've kind of held the fort. What's interesting is the Tigers, the third-place team, right, at one point the Mets were 1-5 and the Tigers were 5-1 when the Tigers left New York. The Tigers are 11-10 now, and the Mets are 12-8. Right. So those start things don't necessarily always mean as much.
Right, the first 10 games isn't as big a sample size as the first 20 games.
So and how awful are the White Sox?
They're unwatchably bad.
So they've been shut out, I think, 6 times already this season in the first 20 games.
They're this year's A's or Cincinnati Reds from a couple years ago.
Jason Stark was putting out there that the White Sox have a chance to eclipse one of the most ignominious records the Mets have, being one of the worst teams of all time, and the White Sox might be worse than the 1962 Mets.
Look, let's put it this way. We were just saying the Twins scored 66 runs in their first 20 games. The White Sox have scored 43. They're scoring barely over 2 runs a game.
I don't know much about baseball, but I don't think
they've given up
a lot
100
of games doing that.
So they're scoring 2 runs a game, giving up an average of 5. It's going to be really hard. I mean, they've got a negative 65 run differential already. That's brutal.
So the thing for the other teams in that division, and maybe that's a way that the Guardians can stay near the top, because you're going to get to play the White Sox a bunch of times. That could also help the Twins, by the way.
Yeah, but it's not going to help them enough, because basically any game you now lose to the White Sox becomes backbreaking in a sense.
But keep in mind that if we talk about the Twins at 7-12, had the Twins won 2 more games and in this period, they'd be 9-10.
Right.
No one would care.
But the the further
It's only 2 games.
Right. The further you get out, though,
Right,
the
right.
less you could be like only 2 games.
Still too early there. Now the
Right.
West, the American League West. What's interesting is that and I think
Nobody's
this is gonna
playing
happen.
great.
Everybody's going to beat the hell out of everybody else in that division this year.
Right. Especially with the Athletics playing better. They're at least playing like a pesky bad team
Right.
instead of just a historically
They're like
bad
a major
team.
league team.
Right. They're playing like a major league team. This was something I thought that could happen with them. I even talked about this in our season preview, that they're a team that literally has no pressure on them. Nobody's really paying attention to them. They can just show up and play. Guys are going to get playing time that would normally not get playing time. It's probably, in some respects, a very easy playing environment, especially when you're on the road. So I imagine they might be at the kind of team that they're not going to win 80 games, but they could win like 70 and be a really annoying team to have to play late in the season.
So, quick question: which team will draw more fans this season, the White Sox or the A's? Did you see some of the pictures from the White Sox?
This is legitimately a difficult decision.
They said there's 10,000 people in the stands. There was like 5.
Right.
5 people. And the A's are going to be leaving for Sacramento next year, where they're going to play in a, is it 14,000 capacity?
I think the White Sox might be in more
Field?
trouble because unless they start improving,
I think so too.
Given how bad and how directionless the franchise has been, I feel like they're ripe for the fans to just sort of stop showing up at a protest. Like,
Well,
we need to change, and this is how
They
we're going to
hired
get
a new GM, actually. They got rid of Kenny Williams, as you know, and I can't remember the guy's name, and that's bad on me. But because they thought he could fix them faster than anybody else. Well, the way that they're going right now, he makes you scratch your head a little bit going, no, they're going the wrong way.
Right, they're getting
now
worse.
They're horribly injured.
Everything.
And I think they'll have a fire sale,
Right, and everything that has gone wrong could go wrong for them, or everything that could go wrong has gone wrong for them. So it's just been an absolutely brutal start to the season for the White Sox.
And it was so cute this week because at one point earlier in the week, the Angels were 9-9, and right away everybody's saying, "Will Mike Trout make the playoffs?"
Boom!
Is this the year?
They get swept 9-12.
And they're 9-12, sinking in the division, and it's it's tough. And so if you had to pick one manager in the American League who you think is going to be the first to be booted out,
Probably Pedro Grifol over in Chicago.
I think I would say that too. But I've been on his case, and he comes on the morning show for Sirius on the baseball, and he every week and you're thinking this guy's like a dead man walking, and I don't know how. I have nothing against this guy,
But it's hard to listen to.
You can't get rid of 25 players. So don't you think they would do that?
Right.
So how about the National League?
Well, the NL East basically is playing out exactly how you expected it to play right now.
Yeah, didn't Water find its level pretty quickly?
Water
there?
found its level. You've got the Braves, the Phillies, the Mets. All of them are playing really good baseball. Then you've got the Nationals and the Marlins, who are not playing good baseball.
Here's the thing about the pain in the neck Phillies and the Braves, okay?
Right.
The Mets have won 8 out of 10. So have the Phillies and the Braves. The Mets have gained no ground.
Well, they've gained ground in that. Now they're 12-8.
Well, they have a winning record.
They have a
now,
winning record, and they're
but
there.
they haven't moved in the standings at all.
Were you counting on catching the Braves this year?
Not a chance.
Exactly. So let's not get ahead of ourselves.
I'd like
here.
to take a shot at the Phillies, and I think that series in London that 2-game series is going to be a weird series that somehow could have a bearing on the division because it's going to be weird.
I never think about it that way because it feels very unfair to be like, oh yes, we're behind the Phillies by 1 game. It's because of that 1 game we played in London back in June.
Well, just how a team handles that kind of a trip, and
Right.
Not everybody will handle it the same.
That I think is a fair point. I just don't like the idea that if the Mets are behind the Phillies by 1 game at the end of the year, we can point to a particular series.
If they would have lost the 2 games in London, you might be going, that darn series.
Nah. There are plenty of other games
I'm a
they
Met
lost.
fan just like you. Who you kidding? So and the Nationals are they're hanging around.
They're playing again like a pesky bad team.
Right. And I think we probably had the Marlins ahead of them until we watched the Marlins play this year.
And then you're like, oh, no,
and you're
they're
like, no, the
bad.
Marlins are the worst team. They might be the worst team in the National League, actually.
Right.
Which was be saying something when you're talking that the Rockies play in the National League still.
Well, I think because if you go over to the NL Central, everybody's just kind of mediocre.
Yeah, the Brewers surprised me because that's another surprise. So I
believe.
I didn't believe in them before the season. They're still in first place in the division. They're 13-6. That's the mark
They're
of a
scoring.
good team.
They're pitching well.
Yeah, I just feel like it's kind of like a wet paper towel, you know.
I think, but you look at it. The last place Cardinals are 9-12. The first place Brewers are 13-6. That's not that's a division where a week or two of good play can change your fortunes.
So I know we're going to a Met game in a little over a week. I'm going to continue my National League Central viewing since I'm going to watch the Cubs play against the Mets on Friday, and the Cardinals on Friday, and the Cubs next Monday.
Oh, that'll be interesting. And the Cubs have had another really good start to their year. Shoto Imamanga has looked fantastic.
And fantastic. Has given up a run.
Going to be the Cy Young at this rate.
So, and the Reds are doing what they need to do.
And Nico Horner has been...
Nico Horner's had a really good start for the Cubs, and I really like that. So he's he's the kind of guy you'd say he's a good little player.
So
why do we do that, right?
Him?
Why do we do like good little player? You know, like he's like Thomas the Tank or something. You know,
oh look, it's cute. Your efforts are cute.
Yeah, so he's just a good baseball player, and I think that we should go. And I was going to say the Reds, I think they're doing what they need to do, which is not give it up in the first couple of months of the season when they didn't get off to a great start.
Right, now they're just going to find their way, and hopefully they get there. You look at the Pirates, and the Pirates are a sign how things can change quickly because they were flying really high at 9-2, and then over their next 10, they go 2-8, and they're 11-10.
You know, we watched the Pirates, and they came to New York, and the Mets were, I guess, fortunate to sweep them, or they swept them. And what you saw from manager Derek Shelton was protecting the pitchers because Jared Jones came out, and the Mets couldn't touch this guy. And after 59 pitches, 50 of which were strikes,
they pull
him out of the game after 5 innings. The Pirates end up losing the game late to the Mets, and everybody is because this guy hasn't ever pitched that many innings, and so they're trying to limit the innings now. I think that's really hard to see how smart it is when you're at this point in the season. But if the Pirates are in it in August and September, and this guy can pitch, all of a sudden Derek Shelton's going to look like a really smart manager.
And it's interesting because you look, when you finally finish up with the NL Central and head over to the NL West, you've got the Dodgers that are leading that division. But given they've dropped their last 2 games to the Mets, they don't look as good on top of that now. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They've not been, and what we were afraid of is kind of true with them. Their pitching is not great.
It's well, and they'll get guys back. So
right.
I think I'm less concerned about the pitching there when I look at the lineup because the Mets are playing.
Well, then the other fear
game
you had for them.
Well, the Mets played them. I think this weekend so far. Really, maybe the pitchers didn't want anything to do with Betts, Ohtani, and Freddie Freeman. So they pretty much walk them.
Well, the Mets. I mean, from yesterday's game, Betts, Ohtani, and Freeman were on base 12 times. They got on base every single time they came up, all 3 of them. The Dodgers lost 6-4.
Right, because the rest of the lineup is
especially when Will Smith
terrible.
Isn't playing.
Right.
It's even more pronounced if Will. So what's terrifying is you're thinking if you're the Dodgers, oh God, we're a Will Smith. You're a Will Smith, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, or Shohei Ohtani injury away from being in a nightmare scenario.
And so the Mets leaned into that yesterday because in the 8th inning, when the game was tight, the Mets brought in their closer, which is not
Edwin Diaz to get through the 8th inning
because it was Betts, Freeman, and he ends up walking Betts and Freeman to load the bases.
Betts and Ohtani,
Betts and Ohtani, and then he strikes out
Freeman to get out of the inning,
and Teoscar Hernandez.
Right, and then they bring in a completely different pitcher,
a guy who wasn't supposed to pitch, Reed Garrett, who was the Mets story of the season out of the bullpen.
But that you could also see the way they looked at it.
Pitch to the bottom of the order. That was the point.
You get past those 3 guys, you can handle the Dodgers.
Good managing, I think, there by Carlos Mendoza to think, you know what, I'm going to go with my best against their best because I think after those 3 or 4 guys when Will Smith plays, that lineup is going to struggle a little bit, which we've seen.
Right, and then you have the teams like it's interesting because the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks, and the Giants sort of feel like which one of these teams is going to wake up first.
Again, another division in which everybody's going to beat the hell out of each other.
Right.
And that's why I think the Padres, Giants, Diamondbacks, take your pick.
I think the Diamondbacks are the team that I think is most likely right now to figure it out because they've just been kind of stuck in the mud, but they've been able to score well. They're pitching better, I think, than any of the other teams.
Well, and they don't even have Eduardo Rodriguez pitching for them yet. So
right.
I think that's something that I didn't realize, that he hasn't even thrown a pitch for that team this year.
The Giants are a team that, I feel like they always kind of get it done with smoke and mirrors, but you know what? They always get it done, so how much can it really be smoke and mirrors at a certain point?
As a Met fan, are you worried about going to San Francisco after you leave Los Angeles now?
Always, because I always feel like we play the Giants terrible.
Yeah, or they play us well, depending on how you look at it. So,
and the Rockies just stink.
Yeah, well, and what they're lucky to have in the National League are the Marlins.
Right.
So
they're lucky that the White Sox. So they're lucky in two respects. It's two AL teams that I think saved the Rockies: the White Sox and the Astros. The White Sox saved them because they're worse. So people are going to talk to them about them as being the paragon of badness, and the Astros distract because they're a good team that should be bad. So when we're talking about bad baseball teams, we always have two teams we can go to over in the American League that the Rockies won't get mentioned more than as a footnote. The Marlins will get mentioned more, too, because they were a playoff team last year. So that's interesting to talk about. We all knew the Rockies were going to stay.
If I were to bet, though, I'm still betting them. If Verlander came back and pitched on Friday night, pitched 5 innings, looked good. They won the game behind him. They're going to get Framber back. I'm still not worried about the Astros.
Right. You said that last week. You said that.
I'm sticking with my story.
Right. They're 3-7 in their last 10. And they got it, but I just worry about them
getting too far behind. I just don't think that anybody's going to pull away in that division, at least not right now. And the Rangers have their own pitching injuries, including Max Scherzer, who's supposed to come back, and Jacob deGrom someday, who'll come back. And so let's talk about some of the player performances for the week and some of the things that were of interest. I mentioning Michael Busch, who tied a Cub record with home runs in 5 straight games. They brought him over from the Dodgers, and strangely, the Cubs are right at the top of the division near the Brewers.
Well, Cody Bellinger finally had his first really good week for the Cubs. He had a great week for them. Hit 2 home runs, batted .350, really helped kind of drive their offense and sort of kind of came back because that was a bit of a fear for them given that he did not get off to a hot start this year how good he was last year.
Yeah, and that's certainly they're counting on that from him, and he's counting on it too because he's got the opt-out, so if he decides he wants to leave, he's got to have a good season in order to make hay there. We mentioned Whitey Herzog sadly passing away this week. Also, Dodger pitcher Carl Erskine, who was 97 years old. Great profile in The Athletic from Tyler Kepner on Carl Erskine, Dodger great. And Ken Holtzman. I don't know if you are familiar with Ken Holtzman, who was one of the really good left-handed pitcher for the 69 Cubs among other teams, but that's how I first became to know him because he was their number 1 the year the Mets came back and won that division. And he also pitched for the A's. Really good major league pitcher. How about Ozzie Albies fracturing his toe?
He just always seems to get hurt.
Yeah, well, what a player. And I think that's probably why he isn't considered to be the best second baseman in the game.
He's going to miss 80-something games every season. But it feels like he misses gigantic chunks of every single season due to injury. He's a very injury-prone player.
Ranger Suarez, I noted, and this makes me a little nervous because I didn't anticipate him going 3-0 and pitching a complete game shutout, obviously over the Rockies, but still he has looked really good this year, and that would be a game changer, I think, or a season changer for the Phillies if they can go Wheeler, Aaron Nola.
If Suarez can be his playoff, if he's his playoff self during the regular season, that's a big difference.
Because the Phillies are going to score runs, and obviously we said they're on an 8-2 streak, so that's going to be something there. Couple of interesting guys. 34-year-old Albert Suarez of the Orioles pitched in a major league game for the first time in 7 years.
That's just wild.
I just love stories like this.
Having a guy come back 7 years after his last appearance to make the majors and pitch is just cool.
And the Red Sox have a pitcher named Cam Booser who's 32, and he made his major league debut, and I guess he retired in 2017 because he had all kinds of arm problems, and then over the course, sort of like the rookie, even though he's and then he kind of kept on throwing. All of a sudden, he found his location, and he played in a game for the Red Sox after not ever pitching in the major leagues, making his debut at 32. That's pretty unusual.
That is pretty cool.
So I like that kind of stuff. Injuries you mentioned, so we've got Darvish now on the 15-day.
Chris Bryant is on the IL with back
issues.
What else is new? Once again, Francisco Alvarez was put on the 15-day IL, but I think he's going to get shifted to something longer now that he's going to have surgery now.
Right?
So he's probably going to be out 6 to 8 weeks.
He's going to be out until after the All-Star break, I think.
Right, it's going to be a while.
I don't know what the Mets are going to do. I just can't imagine they're going to try to play the next 2 months with Omar Narvaez and Tomas Nido. So the Mets got a problem there, which right now things are going well. Nobody wants to talk about.
Right.
Jack Leiter made his debut for the Rangers finally.
Struck out his first batter and then gave up.
Then he got hammered.
Yeah, then he struggled.
But
first starts, you can't really, other than he's now in the major leagues, he's got his first start. I can't wait to see his second.
I tried to get Al Leiter and his brother Mark Leiter, both of whom pitched in the major leagues, to consider being on a podcast with us for Father's Day because they are the first brothers who pitched in the major leagues who each have a son who's pitching in the major leagues, which just happened this week.
That is cool.
Mark Leiter Jr. has been in the league for a while, and obviously Jack Leiter finally there. So what I just wonder about the Leiters, do they ever get together and watch baseball, and what that conversation might be like?
I think probably Al and his brother might. I think the kids are probably a little busy.
Let's watch some baseball together and just hear what goes on with those guys.
I think the issue is that they're probably too busy during the season, so it'd only be in the postseason they could get together and do that, and that's if the kids aren't in.
And it made me think about pitchers that come out of AAA, which is where Jack Leiter, and how they can be sort of okay in AAA, and they get to the major leagues, and sometimes they're really, really good, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, how could we have had this guy down there so long?
It's very rare that a guy comes up unheralded. He might have a good start, and he wasn't great in AAA, and he might come up and have an unbelievable start, but that's never seen. It's very rare, I feel like, for some guy to come up unheralded, not be great in AAA, and then all of a sudden be unhittable in the major leagues.
I mean, it happens that AA guys come to the major leagues because they say that is a fairly not that far apart a level as it would be to single A, obviously. But yeah, it made me think about that with Jack Leiter. And the A's have a closer named Mason Miller. You may not be familiar with Mason Miller. Who's throwing 103 miles an hour, and the A's bullpen, I think, is among the best bullpens in the American League, which is why they're not as bad as we thought they were going to be.
And for them, there's probably just takes off so much pressure this season. Okay, we didn't get off to the terrible start. Now, even if they stink for a while, unless they lose like 14 games in a row or something, nobody's going to really pay attention to exactly how bad they are this year.
No, they'll do what we do, going, wow, I thought they were going to be worse.
Right, exactly. And so having that be how you're greeted all season is great. There's just not pressure on you.
Tyler O'Neill, the Red Sox, unfortunately ran into Rafael Devers.
He's been unbelievable.
He was leading the American League in home runs.
Right, he was.
I think Trout is now, but he was second. He's now second. Jordan Montgomery finally made his debut. Was pretty good for the.
Blake Snell has been pitching. He's been bad. So interesting how those two free agency strategies have kind of worked out differently for those two guys. So it's going to be very easy if that kind of holds up through this year to see what happens as a result after this season.
Right.
Who played it correctly.
Max Fried, who was my pick for National League Cy Young Award winner, has looked nothing like a Cy Young Award winner so far.
It's only April, but you're going to have to hope that he turns it around soon.
But I'm sure he'll pitch like 4 times against the Mets, and they won't get any hits, and they'll lose every time. So that's coming.
He'll get a Cy Young on the back of that.
And Marcelo Zuna, much to, I guess, a little bit of frustration, for Met fans, is been unbelievable.
The dude just hits.
So he's...
And they've got a big homestand coming up this week, playing Texas, Miami in the beginning of a Cleveland Guardians series over the weekend.
Yeah, I think any series against the Miami Marlins right now you're looking forward to.
Anytime you got to play Miami, you're feeling good.
If you're the Braves. And ex-Met Travis d'Arnaud, who is the backup catcher in Atlanta to Sean Murphy, All-Star, hit 3 homers in a game. It just kills me, in that. So, I did notice the schedule this week, and you mentioned the Braves taking on Texas, Miami, and Cleveland. There's not, and a homestand, there are not a lot of good matchups this week. It's kind of interesting. It's one of those weeks where...
Right, it's pretty quiet. There's not any games where you're really looking forward to it being like, I can't wait to see how that's going to go. I'm not really thinking about, I can't wait for that Yankees-Rays series.
Well, the Yankees-Rays, actually, and the Yankees play the Orioles, tomorrow.
Well,
so I'd say that is the series. That's next week.
There's an important series next week for Detroit and Minnesota because we're both concerned about where Minnesota is. Detroit's been a team that's kind of hanging on and playing a division rival like that. One of those two teams could be sent kind of either Minnesota pulls themselves out of the basement and kind of announces themselves as being back in contention, or Detroit can really put them down there and make them really be struggling to get anywhere this season.
But of the earlier series in the week, right, if I just went through the matchups, Red Sox Guardians, Phillies Reds, okay, Dodgers Nationals, Brewers Pirates. Well, there you go. That's interesting because those are the good teams. Tigers Rays, a little. A's Yankees, White Sox Twins, Marlins Braves. These are some really desultory matchups.
Right, now, granted, that's also because there's just a lot of teams that are all hovering.
You got to play all these teams.
And we're all hovering around 500 right now, so we haven't kind of stratified the good teams and the bad teams yet, which I think is what you're going to see shake out over the
It's happening already.
Right, you're going to see the shake out over the next 2 weeks where teams are sort of sorting themselves into what the hierarchy is going to be this year.
So, yeah, I think this is one of those weeks where, you love there to be these great epic matchups, but I think all we're going to see this week is just a bunch of baseball games.